Hello friends, want some inside tricks on how to ink comics? You need to check this video out. Hello, it's me, your old pal Max West. As you know, I draw comics and I do children's picture books. Now in this video I want to talk about inking comics. You know, this applies to everything, whether you draw manga, whether you're drawing a 300-page graphic novel, or whether you're drawing a webcomic, and so on and so on. Alright. Now, as you know, I like to work traditionally. So I'm going to be talking about traditional tools like ink and brush and pen. Alright, let's get started. You know, when I say inking, a key word is in there, and that's ink. When you draw comics, you'll need a good black ink so it reproduces well. Now this right here, this is India ink I use. Other kinds of inks exist as well. I mean, some people, they like to use Japanese or Chinese ink that's used for ink painting. Some might like to use the acrylic ink, which is like acrylic paint. Once it's dry, it's completely impermeable. Me, I use India ink. Now you'll want to make sure that the ink, it's waterproof. You know, check the label. If it says water-based, water-soluble, non-waterproof, stay away from it. Now, when I do my inking, I keep black ink like that. I keep it in a small jar like this. It's also handy to have a container of water for rinsing your pen or your brush in between inking, and something to clean it off. I use paper towels. Some like to use cloth rags, or I've heard of people that like to use old socks for that. I'll just use whatever works. Now, yes, the typical tools you use for inking. Now, my workhorse here are dipping pens, also called nib pens. Basically, you have a plastic or a wooden holder, and you can pull that out and use different pen nibs. Let's give it some. That's a Speedball C6 nib, which I use for lettering. I showed that in a previous video. This is a Speedball 512 nib. This is what I usually use for inking my work. Some give thin lines, some give really thick lines. This is a Speedball A5 nib. This is a C4 nib. Now again, it's mainly the Western type of pen I'm more familiar with. Some people might like to buy stuff off the internet. I know there's some of the Japanese type nib pens. I'm not too familiar with those. If you want to try those, go right ahead. Alright, now the next thing I want to talk about, another tool for inking with, brushes. Now here you got some brushes. Make sure you get watercolor brushes. Make sure they're round. Stay away from oil or acrylic brushes. You know, you dip them in water, dip them in the ink, and you ink. I usually use brushes here for masking in large areas of black ink. Of course, some people like to draw lines with brushes. That is very challenging to do. You know, if you're interested in that, try checking out the work of some of the gifted artists out there, like Walt Kelly of Pogo, or Bill Watterson, who drew Calvin and Hobbes. Those are examples of brushwork. And some people just like to draw with markers. There's all kinds of, markers you can use. You got the Uniball pen. This is a pigment liner made by Statler. I occasionally use this. This is a Pilot Precise V5 pen. Some like the Pigma Microns made by the Japanese company Sakura. Oh yes, and there are these. I might have to demonstrate these someday. This right here, you see, these are technical drawing pens. Sort of like with the old fountain pen. There's a reservoir here. You fill it with India ink, and you draw with it. These give uniform lines. You won't get the variety you would with a brush or a dip pen, but these still can be fun to work with. Of course, these are a pain to clean. Alright. Alright now. Gather round, friends. I'm going to give you a demonstration here. I'm going to do some inking here of this comic. I'm going to use various tools here on the page. I'm going to try some, going to do some India ink rendered with a dipping pen. I'm going to use also a little bit of marker on the page, you know, for purposes of my demonstration. Alright, first things first here. Let's get some more light. Okay. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to draw a panel here, panel borders. I'm going to use a Speedball C4 nib. Let's get the ink ready. Alright. Poison Ivy Gulch, I draw the panel borders freehand, and with the C4 nib point. Now when I do Sunnyvale Stories or Dominic and Claire or my comics pages, I'll use one of the Rapidograph pens, and I'll use a straight edge like a T-square to make sure I get as straight of a line as possible. Working with a nib pen takes a lot of practice, and yes, it can be messy, but you can get some really nice lines out of these that you can't get with a marker or a technical drawing pen. Alright, there you go. Alright, now that we got that done, I'm just going to do the panel borders here. I'm going to do the speech balloons. I did the panel borders. Alright. Okay, I'm going to be using my workhorse, the Speedball 512 nib. This is a 512. This is a 513. I used to use this with the very early Sunnyvale comics I drew. Alright, let's get a nice speech balloon there. When you're drawing speech balloons for a character, don't put the tail so close to the mouth. I mean, I know they're called balloons, but the characters aren't actually inflating them, just like with a balloon or bubble gum. Alright, and there we go. I mean, just look how vivid that looks. The borders and the speech balloons. I'm going to let this sit and dry for a bit. Now usually when I ink, I rely on the nib pen, but for this demonstration I want to demonstrate a couple of other tools, so after I let this dry for a bit, I'm going to pull out this is a thick line marker. This is a Statler pigment liner, 1.2 millimeters. It gives a nice thick line, And that's what I did use to draw my picture book with, Hilda and Richie. I'm going to have to talk more about that in a future video, especially considering the fact that very soon I'm going to be doing their next book, Hilda and Richie's Wizard. Let me see here. Yeah, this is my book. That was done by someone else based on my artwork. Yeah, this was, I drew this with, you know, markers. These Staedtler pigment liners that you see here. The color, most of that came from professional art markers like these. Again, I'll demonstrate all that in a future video. Oh, if you're interested in buying a copy, I'll include some links in the video description. Digital copies are on Amazon. You can get paperback copies through my store at PayHip. And soon I hope to get these into bookstores as well as libraries. But again, that's a whole other video. Alright, I think the ink has dried some. Yeah, I've gotten my, I've smeared ink before. Now you see, this type of pen, this type of fine line marker pen, this gives a very thick line. Again, I like doing that because this is a close-up of Ace. As I've said before, the nib pen is usually my workhorse. But, you know, try out different tools. You know, see what works for you, see what your results are. I mean, some of us, we find materials that we like, and we stay hitched to them for our career. I originally wasn't keen on using the nib pen for drawing up until Matt Madden introduced me to them. I had one colleague, who I'd rather not identify, discourage me from using a dip pen because they were very messy. Yeah, that same friend, he says I should stop drawing traditionally and go digital. And I honestly do not want to get into that debate. I prefer traditional tools. Alright, yeah, you see those rich, thick lines we get with this Staedtler pigment liner? I mean, just look at that. I mean, look how vivid that looks, how rich. I mean, that's why most comics throughout the whole 20th century and even today are drawn with ink. I mean, it reproduces so well. Alright. Now for this panel, I'm just going to go over it with Uniball pen. Very careful not to smear anything. Again, there's no right or wrong tools for making comics. If you train your mind, your eyes, and your hand, and there's nothing you can't accomplish. I love the expression I gave Lotta here. She's just sassing Ace. And Ace doesn't like Doesn't like it when Lotta speaks to him like that. He has to remind him here who is the adult. Another thing when you practice comics or when you make your own comics, don't worry about what other people think. I mean, don't worry about what internet trolls will think, what your mother will think, what your art teacher will think. Just go ahead and do it. You shouldn't let fear hold you back. It's looking good. Yeah, I wonder how this block of chunky soup tastes. I don't know. I ain't gonna eat it. Now once I finish inking a page, I let it sit for at least a good 30 minutes, sometimes longer. Yeah, after I finish inking this strip here, I'm going to stop the video. So I think we've ran for quite some time. And there we go. I'm going to stop the video here. Thank you for tuning in. Again, subscribe to my channel by hitting that subscribe button. Make sure also you hit the bell icon to be notified of new videos. Check out my work in some of the links below. And once, if you want to see that picture book of mine, Hilda Richie is the title, I'll include links to where you can get it. Until next time, friends, it's your old pal Max West saying goodbye.